Hi everyone, and welcome to the third and final of the Better Places for People webinars as part of last week's World Green Building Week. You've joined us today for a discussion around the co-benefits of green buildings, and today we're questioning whether sustainable buildings really can cater for both people and planet. It's a pleasure to have so many of you with us live today, and we hope that you'll enjoy contributing throughout the session. If you have questions for our speakers, then please do write them directly in the question box and we'll pick these up throughout the session. Or if you have comments to share with the wider world, then please do tweet us. Please use the hashtag Better Places for People, World Green Building Week 2018, or say hello to us at WorldGBC. Now, the structure of our session today will include a short introduction from me, and then we'll be handing straight over to our 5 speakers in today's session for a brief insight into each of their varied areas of expertise before we open up into the wider discussion, including audience Q&A. So, to start the introductions, my name is Katrina Brady. I'm head of Better Places for People, which is one of the global projects of the World Green Building Council. Now, the World Green Building Council are a global network consisting of over 70 national green building councils. Our membership totals around 50,000 individuals and organisations, and we engage our membership around achieving green buildings for everyone, everywhere. Now, Better Places for People is one of the global projects of the World Green Building Council, aimed at increasing the demand and supply of green buildings, which are supportive of the health, well-being and productivity of the people within them. Now, when we talk about green buildings at the World Green Building Council, we quite often refer to the co-benefits of green buildings, which is a phrase that I really like. And we say that a building that is defined as green is understood to have loads of positive benefits for the occupant and their surroundings. And some examples of these benefits that you get from occupying a greener building is that you might have lower utility costs in terms of energy consumption. You're going to probably produce less waste, use less water, you're not combusting fossil fuels. And then, of course, that all correlates with an improved health and well-being and also boosted productivity of the occupant. So to explore this topic further, we have 5 great panellists on board for this session who are going to share their insights and expertise today. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our 5 panellists who have joined us to discuss these co-benefits of green buildings. First, we'll hear from Despina Katsikakis, who is an international partner and head of occupier business performance at Cushman and Wakefield. Cushman and Wakefield are a global commercial real estate services company headquartered in London. Raefer Wallis is the founder and CEO of Giga, which incorporates Reset and Origin. Origin is one of the world's largest building material resources, creating a world-leading data hub. And Reset is a healthy building standard and certification program, focusing on factors that influence human health, such as indoor air quality. Helen Pineo is a lecturer at University College London's Institute for Environmental Design and Engineering, and specialises in sustainable and healthy built environments. Helen brings an academic insight to our panel today, and her current research focus is investigating how urban planning policy and decision makers use evidence about the built environment and health. Jason Tang is Vice President of Intelligent Air Solutions at Mann & Hummel, based in Singapore. Mann & Hummel are a manufacturing firm, and one of their areas of specialism is around air filtration technology, which they use to provide clean air solutions around their Our Air program. And finally, we'll have Lisa Bate, who is the Regional Managing Principal of B+H North America, based in Toronto. Now, B+H Architects are one of the largest architecture, interior design and urban planning firms in the world, so offer a great global expertise on the topic of designing green buildings. Lisa is also the current World Green Building Council Chair. Now, after all the panellists have given their short introductory presentations, we'll have a dedicated discussion and Q&A session to close the webinar. So please do pose any questions for our panellists in the question box throughout the session, as well as joining the conversation on Twitter. So it gives me great pleasure now to hand over to our first speaker. Despina, over to you. I think you might be on mute, Despina.
Thank you for that clarity, Katrina. I was carrying on mute. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to particularly focus today on this topic from the perspective of the workplace environment. In the last few years, we have seen an awful lot of noise around how the work environment is impacting well-being, productivity, and I wanted to address how these issues begin to create a greater focus for us having both green and well priorities in the workplace. So I want to sort of kick off with looking at how work has changed over the last decade, and certainly most recently, work is no longer somewhere you go to, but it's something you do anywhere. And that means that we are now looking at the workplace as a network of virtual and physical places that supports a real blurring of working, living, learning. And that flexibility has also meant that very large users of the workplace are starting to think about creating much more mixed-use integrated campuses, like the image you see on my slide of the Facebook village currently under construction in Menlo Park, which brings residential and workplace together. This is a very important concept because it means that we can now begin to look at how do we create resilient places through addressing this more dynamic use of the environment. And it also begins to question what are the types of environments that people want to go to work and feel productive and healthy being there. So whilst that is all happening in the context and the background, the reality of the office buildings that occupy most of the world is sadly very different. Typical office interiors have not changed very much since Frank Lloyd Wright's first model in 1906. They're still faceless rows of desks. And while some of those buildings are increasingly being designed to be more energy efficient, they're typically only utilized 50% of the typical workday. And even in environments that use hoteling and shared desks, that never really moves beyond 75%. So we're talking about a really systemic waste of resources. In addition to that, we have year on year, the Gallup surveys tell us that 70% of workers are disengaged and uninspired at work. So the combination is really very, very difficult if you look at it from a business lens. And finally, we're really seeing the impact of well-being. And with that in mind, the focus on well-being means that we need to start really thinking about how we place our focus on where the real value of buildings sits. I really love this diagram, which is from the 2014 report of Better Places for People, which really clarifies that as an industry, we tend to focus on reducing the 10%, the energy costs and the rental costs, but at the same time, we often do that by having a negative impact on the 90% of where operational expenditure sits, which is really on staff costs and engagement. We've been doing a lot of research at Cushman Wakefield looking at what the impact of companies that have engaged employees can be. And we're seeing really significant results, 37% lower absenteeism, 65% lower employee turnover, significantly higher productivity, and customer satisfaction. So these are quite important levers. So what I want to quickly go through is what are the things we can be doing differently to contribute to employee performance and at the same time create greater energy resiliency. I tend to group them into 5 key areas. They're around flexibility and convenience, function and comfort, user control and input, the way we use nature and humanity, the way we embrace the sharing economy, and underpinning it all is the way we leverage data to demonstrate value for the individual, the organization, the community, and ultimately the planet. The first thing that I think most people in certainly large cities struggle with is this issue of being able to really leverage choice of using time and location differently. In London, the average commute is about 40 to 60 minutes each way. And over 85% of people arrive at work feeling stressed and exhausted before they even start their working day. I think today we see it as a norm that employees typically will say they would change jobs for ones that offers flexible work time. And if we leverage that flexibility, it means that we can use less space in better ways and much more efficiently at every level from a cost and energy perspective in cities. And we can also reinvigorate local communities by being able to bring some local working options closer to home and give people better quality of life and balance in their work-life choices. The second thing that then this raises is when you do choose to go somewhere to work, you actually don't want to go somewhere that is rows of desks where you will just sit not connecting with anyone. We really want to now focus on having environments that are very much focusing on function and comfort. They're designed to support activity throughout the day, to connect people in meaningful ways to innovate, and to allow people to disconnect, to focus and recharge. I always like to point out that there's just a significant drop in performance when people are exposed to distracting noises. And our ability to have those choices to move to environments that give us that focus is critical in any office design. One of the things that I see becoming a great lever to how we provide these environments is technology. And technology in the way that it provides user control and input in the experiences we have. The office environment today is layered with the ability to collect information through leveraging big data and IoT to facilitate customization, energy savings, and wellness. I believe the office is going to increasingly become very much like a stage set that allows us to reconfigure it to respond to what we need to do day to day and hour to hour. At the same time, the office allows us to be able to, through that customization, understand the quality of air, the quality of light that allows us to work most effectively. It's not an accident that 1/3 of employees' sick leave is attributed to poor indoor air quality. We don't really have the means today to monitor it, but the more we monitor things on an individual basis, as well as at a building level, the more we can monitor energy use, space use, the more resilient and effective space will become. Whilst this technology is giving us all this empowerment, I think the other thing it begins to reinforce is that as human beings, we also need to connect more with nature and each other. So I also see that the office, whilst becoming very technologically enabled, it will also be very much focusing on humanity. Connecting us with each other is really important to being engaged. People are 7 times more engaged if they have a friend at work. So places that actually curate activities and events to create a community are really becoming critical. But connecting us with nature is just as important. We recognize that people are much more relaxed after spending time in a garden, and even large technology companies like Cisco and Microsoft are building tree houses on their campuses, and they find that those are the most inspiring meeting rooms for people to go to. And in Australia, of course, where they're way ahead of this, they are providing herb gardens and healing environments within the office for people to be able to relate to that connection with nature better. I think what we're going to see through all of this is a fundamental shift from looking at buildings as a way to reduce cost to looking at how buildings for work particularly can drive value through being green and well at the same time. And in that, I mean that the power of the office of the future is to decrease useless space, wasted time, absenteeism, stress, carbon, and outdated policies, and increase engagement, choice, ideas, collaboration, trust, well-being, and ultimately resilience of both the cities and the places that we work and live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Despina. And I think it's great to see these synergies, I suppose you can call it, that you present of these green and healthy spaces in these more modern workplaces. And in particular, that statistic you showed about 1/3 of employees' sick leave being attributed to bad air quality is really powerful and something I look forward to discussing more during the Q&A. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Katrina.
Let's hand straight over now to Raefer.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Katrina. Just making sure I'm coming through loud and clear as well.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, Raefer.
Fantastic, thanks. All right, diving right in, as Katrina mentioned, we run 2 different verticals. One is Reset Building Standard focused on data as collected from sensors. The other one, Origin, which I'm going to cover a little bit more today. But the topic we were asked to cover, if I can just get this slide, there we go. Green versus healthy, or green and healthy. And touching on this very briefly, what we found on the reset side of things is, as an example, achieving healthy air. We know we can achieve incredibly healthy air within offices, and typically the question is, as an example, at what energy cost? And those in newer projects, those are not mutually exclusive. So we found that both can be achieved together very synergistically, and not particularly rocket science either. So that one in many ways is a bit of an easier one. On the Origin side, hitting the targets of healthy materials while maintaining environmental regeneration, be it across water, energy, so on and so forth, is also achievable, but obviously much trickier. And what we found over the past 15 years of working on this is really that it comes down to the topic of good data and being able to cut through that data as effectively as possible. And over the past few years, we've seen a net shift in conversation from green and healthy towards really just looking for the panacea, and conversation shifting to choice, choice based on good data. There we go. So really, the idea of a foundation of good data combined with tools that then power informed decisions, and a net trend in customization of standards to make those informed decisions. I'll touch on that in a moment. So digging into this question of and trying to solve this issue of really getting to good data to drive informed decisions, we found a ton of data sources throughout the world, lots of databases with very good data, and it really, we're not at a stage where we needed more databases. We had more than enough. The key was really and is in connecting these databases, enabling the data to flow and enabling users to cut through as much data as possible, and as mentioned, empower their choices. There we go, slowly shifting. Went a little too far, my apologies. Now, the way this was built out over the past few years was creating a hub of data as opposed to a database, a structure to bring data together from suppliers as well as product reporting bodies, and redistribute that data to whoever needs it to drive whatever decisions they're aiming to make. And the biggest and best sort of example of what we're trying to emulate in the building world is what was done with census data starting back in 2007. The idea of linking up data sources and enabling that data to flow and the transformational effect it can have on a particular industry. And key there is really creating clear chains of custody that track data sources back to their origin, and that keep the data independent from any bias whatsoever. So here's in the upper right-hand corner is a minor diagram, small diagram of how, for example, the US Census data set up in 2007 to start solving very, very similar issues. How it grew somewhat modestly, but grew in 2008 with, again, driven by this idea of connected data and empowering data flow. Further grew in 2009, again, following the same principles. Exploded in 2010, and this is 8 years ago, so you can imagine on how that looks today. So really, this is what, from a pure data point of view, a very, very good analogy and similar case for what happened in a different vertical and how this is being applied to our industry. One particularly excellent example of this is a group called Mindful Materials, which runs as a nonprofit. It's the largest collaborative of design firms in the world, and looking at the way they've been leveraging the infrastructure that has been built off of the Origin Data Hub. And what it is at the end of the day, I'm going to show a few screenshots just very quickly, are driven by these three principles. So ensuring that facts are for free in order to make sure that people have as much access to facts as possible, no limitations, that the tools they're developing are driven by feedback, and again, this common idea of enabling informed decisions. Sake of time, cutting through a little quicker here. So what you see here is a screenshot of the way the buckets are organized within all this data coming in from dozens of different sources, be they reporting bodies or suppliers. In this case, material ingredients with reporting, breaking data down into whether data is being reported, is it showing data from ingredients and products that have shown improvements or have removed materials that might be harmful to human health. And this particular aspect has been, as most people know, has been a really, really big topic and is a growing one continually, mostly from actually a liability point of view. And if I draw a parallel there, I think a lot of people will remember asbestos in the industry. And when we think about the costs it took to remove that and the derivative costs from there as well, just large companies looking into this issue, thinking what is the risk of bringing in a product that might cause future health issues, and the cost of then removing that product at a later date. So ensuring they have as much data as possible to make the decisions that are necessary. And not going through in details, just conscious of time. I'm just going to go very quickly through the slides, and this is a publicly accessible database. People feel free to go through on your own thereafter. But again, building here transparent chains of custody that show the clear source of the data, whether it's been linked up by a reporting body or by the manufacturer themselves. And again, the purpose here is really to marry the idea of green and health. So here looking at environmental profiles, carbon footprinting of data, and more than anything, making this data accessible so that bodies can then, various groups can then prioritize the data that they're looking for in order to make the decisions that are driving their real estate choices. So here again, similar in the EPD world as we were just looking at a moment ago in the VOC world. Sorry, VOC coming in here. And then all the way through to material sourcing data, if that's a priority for those linking product choice to data source, social responsibility metrics, a lot of this being defined as we speak by this particular group. And finally, apologies, the response is a little bit slow, on other information tied to materials. So just wrapping up here on the last slide, again, the main idea that's in the trend that we've seen is, yes, green and healthy, absolutely possible to bring together as long as the right data is available for people to make their own choices. And always what we're seeing as well is the desire for people to be able to weigh these choices based on the context, the location of the places that they're making decisions in. And I will leave it at that. I think that was the last slide.
Great, thank you, Raefer. And it's great for us to actually see what the Mindful Materials library looks like. So thank you for showing us that. And there's a couple of questions that have come in specifically about that, which we will pick up a bit later. So thank you so much for sharing. And let's now hand over to Helen.
Thanks very much. So I have been asked to give a brief about the academic evidence for health co-benefits of sustainable buildings. And I've looked at the evidence across different building types. And so I'll be very brief about that, but hopefully give people a picture of some of the current state. Pardon me. So some of the key messages that I wanted to get across in this session, first of all, there's definitely a growing evidence base about the range of different health co-benefits that come out through sustainable buildings. And there have been a few recent evidence reviews. The Cedeno-Laurent one was from Harvard colleagues in 2018, and the Darko et al. Was from UCL colleagues. So some very recent available reviews kind of summarizing everything. I think the key message coming out is that integrated design practices really need to be followed to avoid potential tensions of sustainable design and health outcomes from sustainable design measures. But I think that the research that is available to date has really focused on the indoor environmental quality of sustainable buildings, and there's been a lot less emphasis on some of the wider benefits that you would get through applying a BREEAM or LEED or another standard, where And there, for example, might be provision of cycle storage or showers for people to use. So that might increase physical activity or places for social interaction, and those can also have significant health benefits. So sustainable buildings might not only bring about a better indoor environment, but a number of other benefits as well. I think broadening the discussion to also look at housing, the research has shown that there would be potential for significant health benefits when we're using sustainable design and sustainable design standards on low-income housing. So following on from that, a couple of studies here from Sustainable Homes. These are both in the US. The first one using LEED certified properties, and the second one Enterprise Green Communities. So in the first example, they did an evaluation of low-income families' health before and after a move to a LEED certified homes. And they found that indoor pollutants were reduced, and occupants also reported fewer sick building syndrome symptoms. They also had fewer reports of mold, pests, inadequate ventilation, and stuffiness. And then that other study looked again at health before and after a low-income housing renovation project, and they found better self-reported health of the residents. So those were useful evidence to build the business case for sustainable housing. There's probably more studies in relation to sustainable offices. A recent one here in Japan looked at CASB offices, and they found reduced energy use, carbon emissions, and running costs. And they related that to potential perceived health impacts in the study. Another study from Canada looked at post-occupancy evaluation of 12 green and 12 conventional offices. And they found in the green offices, which were mostly LEED buildings, that there was better environmental satisfaction, nighttime sleep quality, mood, and physical symptoms. And then finally, there was a study of office worker health before and after move from a conventional building to a LEED office building in the US. And they found reduced hours absent from asthma, respiratory allergies, depression, and stress. And this was through self-reported measures. And they also found other productivity benefits. And in summary, I think, as I've said, there is a growing evidence base for the co-benefits for health of applying and using sustainable building standards. And I didn't want to focus on this to a great extent, but I think it's important to mention from an academic perspective that the evidence base that we have is not great yet. There's many limitations to the studies in terms of perhaps being a small sample size and other limitations. So I would say that more research is needed, but I don't think that should stop practitioners from building a business case or building a case to say that sustainable buildings do have positive health impacts when we are considering and we do apply integrated design practices. And that would be the caveat, that we need to consider different elements of design and the impact that they would have on health and the environment together. And I've summarized a lot of this research in a recent guidance document that I prepared for the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, just launched in the summer. And so that's called Cities, Health and Wellbeing, and it provides information at different scales of the built environment, from buildings up to city planning scale. And we, within that guidance document, compare LEED and WELL and BREEAM. And we also talk about FitWell in terms of how do those different standards address health and well-being issues. Just wanted to provide you with the references because this is the academic presentation. So if you want any further information, I think most of those are available for anybody. You don't need any special permissions for the journals. But I would note this Cities, Health and Wellbeing by the RICS is available to anybody, and that's more summarized for an industry audience. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Those were some really, really interesting study results that you've shown us, and there's a lot of discussion going on in the question box about them, which is great to share. And thank you for also showing us where we can find out a bit more And as Helen said, she's got this list of references that if anybody would like, I can send them out after this session for people to look at a later point. So thank you, Helen. Let's hand over now to Jason Tang from Man and Hummel.
Just to test, Katrina, could you hear me?
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for having me in this webinar. Man and Hummel, well, we are a German company, and it is coincidental that the color of our logo is green, and that we've been invited onto this webinar. Whatever we do is all around filtration, and what I would like to share is what our air program does in the area of healthy air. So I will not boil the ocean over here because many of my fellow panelists have talked about the importance of good indoor air quality from being much exposed to polluted air, especially in various countries, especially in Asia. And the fact that if you compare indoor and outdoor air, given the way that buildings are designed more and more so, there's a higher chance that pollutants inside the building will be higher than the pollutants that are outside the building. Now, clearly, there are many studies that have also shown the impact of having better indoor air in terms of the investment on the people, where it's going to be more than the amount that people will pay on rental and on energy. And last but not least, of course, some famous studies showing the cognitive improvement that better indoor air can have and resulting in a better productivity. So I think it's useful to, sorry for the double click. I think it's useful to use some observed values in real life that we have seen across different buildings. And here the study was across 14 commercial office buildings. And if you compare the performance of green buildings versus non-certified buildings, and then you will see that for certain of the air pollutants like particle pollutants, PM2.5, PM10, like fungi, like bacteria, the green buildings are performing better than the non-certified buildings. Now, conversely, if you look at other pollutants, for example, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and dangerous chemicals like formaldehyde, surprisingly, the non-certified buildings are actually performing better than the green buildings. Well, this may sound like a surprise to many of us who have been hearing many good things about green buildings. But if you look at the first two vertical columns, where green buildings have been designed to have air change per hour that is much lesser than non-green buildings, the density of occupants are also lesser. This have an impact on certain of these pollutants, and conversely has an impact on the other pollutants as well. So the key message here is that it should not be taken for granted that green buildings are always being operated in a healthy manner, simply because to have both green and healthy is an extremely difficult issue, not only at the design stage, but especially at the post-commissioning and at the operational stage when the building is being used and occupied. So then we know that there is a lot of dollar value that the industry places on having green buildings because, hey, that saves electricity bills, energy bills right off the line. So if you have a $1 now and you are asked to choose an office that somehow has a suboptimal air quality, but still it could be a green building, at the end of 5 years, you may have the chance to save almost $1 on energy bill. But because of the potential loss on productivity, cognitive performance of your people, you may have just lost the chance to earn up to $16. So if you compare $1 and $16, that's almost a 2,000% difference in the return on investment. So then you ask yourself, in reality, what is the real trade-off? And I will leave this question to hang there for a while and move over to do the quick introduction about what Mannheimer, our air program, tries to do. So what we try to do is to use the concept of know, improve, and manage. And this is not meant to be, taken in sequence. It's meant to be in a loop. The general idea is that with the technologies that we now have, you are able to make many of these air quality monitors to be deployed in different parts of the building, end to end, from the time that the air enters the building, all the way to when the air enters a person's lungs. So you can install air quality monitors that can tell you second by second, minute by minute, how the air quality in the whole building from start to finish is really performing. Now, having all those knowledge, having that data at your fingertips, you have to do something with it. And this is where the core expertise of Mannheimer, having done many years of technology and research in air filtration, in air purification, and you can see these technologies coming in different forms that are possible to help customers with their air quality problems in the form of air filters, in the form of air purification systems to help with different pollutants, PM 2.5, chemicals, carbon dioxide, the such and the such to improve the air quality. And of course, last but not least, to have a good way to tie up all these different devices, and in fact, to try and make every atom of air into a 1 and a 0, into a data point where you would then be able to manage it. You will be able to know where the air quality in the building is having problems. You will be able to know and to be reminded when you should be doing your maintenance, your replacements of filters, your replacements and calibration of your air quality monitors, so that you always have a chance to maintain the air quality at the optimal healthy level that you are aiming for. And that's what we do in terms of pushing this concept of know, improve, and manage. And having all these tools at your hand, then you will be able to start looking at your building almost like a virtual space. And we call this intelligent air, where every atom that enters becomes a data point for you. You know exactly where things are going wrong. You know what to do about it. And most importantly as well, with the new technologies in data analytics, in machine learning, you will be able to prepare in advance whether it's a macro environment factor that is hitting you in certain countries in Asia, in the Middle East, for example, or it can be that you know in advance when you should be maintaining something and changing something, planning your maintenance schedules well in advance, such that you are always able to try and optimize not just the air quality, but also your costs involved in maintaining the air quality. And just some examples of how we have used intelligent air to try and balance the two important topics of healthy and green. Here are two case studies that we are able to share. And in both cases, you would see that the particle pollutant can be lowered and at the same time, cutting down the energy consumption. And, what's more, that you could also reduce the workload that you are having in replacing the filters, because now you know the exact time that you should be changing your filters. You change your filters in time, you'll use lesser filters, and you also use lesser labor per year in making any changes to your filters. And I think this is an important understanding that it is indeed possible. Well, it's difficult, yes, but it is possible to achieve both healthy and green. So
Great,
just as a roundup, quick
Sorry,
overview
Jason.
about Mannheimer, and this is who we are, all about filtration. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Sorry for jumping in too early there, but that was some really powerful facts you've presented there. and particularly great for us to see this business case for clean air. And I look forward to discussing all of that more in the forthcoming Q&A. We've had loads of questions in, so thank you everybody who has shared them so far. So last but not least, it gives me great pleasure now to hand over to our World Green Building Council Chairwoman, Lisa Bate.
Thank you so much, Katrina. You can hear me, everybody. Katrina, can you just do a check as well?
Yep, sounds good.
Excellent. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm thrilled to be on this panel and great topics discussed by the others so far. So just a little bit about my role. My day job is as an architect and interior designer for B+H Architects, which is a Canadian-founded global firm. And my after-hours job is chairing the World Green Building Council. I was elected this past June as from Canada GBC as the home country, but very globally focused. So to date, the company has been very involved with World Green Building Council and Canada Green Building Council and US Green Building Council and others. And the Better Places for People with the project that Katrina leads. When it first was launched, we were one of the founding members of the committee, the steering committee, and actually our representative on that, I was involved, but a woman by the name of Sabina Ernst led our group, and Sabina is a woman from Montreal in Quebec, Canada, so French, German, English speaking, a woman of the world, and she was a representative on this committee and helped produce that report that was spoken about earlier in 2014. So Sabina played a very important role because she is was our expert specifier in Asia. And as we know, materials in the world are often very much divided between what is produced, manufactured in the East and what is produced and manufactured in the West. And clients like Microsoft and AstraZeneca and Tencent, thank you for bringing that up previously, Despina, we did work on those projects, and IKEA, all of those groups have very high requirements around material composition, low VOC, looking at indoor air quality, but also it's around manufacturing practices as well, some of the sort of lean manufacturing processes. So working with Raefer's company, Giga, and the Matter database that was discussed, what we found is we were very capable to pull together data that could support what these global companies building new regional headquarters in Asia wanted as for their workers. So very early days around looking at indoor air quality, but really looking at worker satisfaction, attraction and retention of talent, and the recognition that more money spent on providing a healthy and well and comfortable place to work was more important than the bricks and mortar, so to speak. Oop, I got a delay happening here. Did you turn it over to me, Katrina?
Yeah, it should be working for you, but if it's not, I can always drive it.
Can you please do that? It seems to not be wanting to work for me here.
Sure.
Hang on one second, and it just actually then, decided. So basically, our own office in Shanghai, which is in the Soho building near Ritz-Carlton, Portman Ritz-Carlton, we were able to design it to a LEED Silver standard. It would have been able, and this was completed in 2008. Our challenge was our landlord would not give us the base building data that was required for us actually to actually get the certification at the time. We are now 10 years later, and landlords are a lot more conducive to sharing that information. But at the time, there was a bit of a fear around doing so. Could you advance, Katrina, please? So working once again with Raefer, I love how globally so many organizations are connected. We were the first company to actually publicly disclose our indoor air quality across, at that point in time, 10 studios. We launched that 2 years ago during World Green Building Council Week. And I remember pitching this idea to our CEO, who said to me, Lisa, what happens if the air is bad in Ho Chi Minh City? What are we going to do if this is actually terrible news? And I said, well, the best news about all of us improving healthy and productive workplaces is that we have an opportunity, to correct it within an hour. And we had tested it for quite some time. It often came down to where we had specified in every studio that only green cleaning products could be used. You'd see all of a sudden a spike at 7 o'clock in the morning with VOCs, and it would be that a quick note to the cleaners saying, thank you so much for your cleaning, but please could you use the products that we had specified for cleaning. You'd sometimes see it where indoor air quality air quality outside PM 2.5 in Shanghai or in Beijing would go through the roof, so the landlords would shut off fresh air intake. So I'm looking around and everyone's falling asleep, and I'm falling asleep at my desk in Shanghai, and then realized it was a call to the landlord to say, you have great filters, Hummel and Mann, thank you Jason and group, you have great filters, so please trust them and turn on the circulation because we have CO2 going through the roof. So really it was about calibrating and sharing our successes and our challenges and our learnings across the world as we analyzed our studios from Asia to the Middle East and across North America. Advance, please. And this is then just showing the level of what you're able to see. You can see across, so everyone had this on their phone. It was publicly disclosed. There's lots of companies that do so through the Reset app. And you can see right there, you're looking at VOC in terms of what was happening. You can see a peak time right there. And as I said, it's early in the morning, and we often found that had to do with cleaning. Advance, please. And that was really just from basic monitors that were able table set as well. So the other piece that we worked on with this was really producing our global green master specifications. So at the time, I moved back to Toronto after 4 years in Shanghai in 2016. And when we launched this in 2016, we'd already started to put together within our database the connection to the origin database so that we could actually look at the composition of materials, because we wanted a green master spec. We wanted to have it that we knew what we could specify and was available to specify in Dubai or in Doha, as well as in Wuhan and Hangzhou and Hong Kong and in Singapore and as well in North America and South America. So we had about 55,000 Asia-based products through the Origin platform that Giga had pulled together. And then when I moved back to North America, we decided to help see what we could do to help launch, because we wanted the information and the data into the database. So we were able to work with our suppliers, and we offered free training sessions. And the great part about this platform is it's free to suppliers. A lot of them are very expensive to suppliers. So we helped and did some training sessions, which really built our own green spec. And we really tested this on 2 major shopping centers, inter-IKEA shopping centers in Wuhan and Wuxi. These are 200,000 square meter and 180,000 square meter facilities, so massive, as well as 2 Microsoft campuses and a campus as well for AstraZeneca. So it helped us, and these projects that we consulted to and were paid to provide design work also helped to build that global database for us and for others to use. It's completely, as Raefer pointed out, available information. Please procrastinate. And just another thing that we're, so obviously with our focus on sustainability is around materiality, is on health and well-being of occupants, but also we really try to deliver net zero buildings. And this is showing typical buildings in Canada, this sort of typical Toronto office building, looking at energy consumption. And then you can see to the far left, the average Canadian office building. So you're seeing an urban situation with tall towers, an average Canadian, And then you can see at 162 and the equivalent kilowatt hours per meter square per year that an average LEED certified building is at 162. Well, now that we've completed the first net zero carbon post-secondary education institution at Mohawk College that you see fourth from the right, we're very, very focused on getting this energy down. And a recent project, Humber College building, and ironically, this Humber College that you see is the lowest building, is an existing building that was retrofitted using Passive House. So we are rating system, rating tool, certification tool agnostic. It's whatever makes sense for the project and for the climate and for the environment in the region and obviously the occupants and clients. So we really track where we are on this energy score. So right now we have 5 of the lowest 9 buildings in Canada. Please advance. This is just a little bit about that net zero building that I just mentioned. It was done in collaboration with a firm called McCallum Architects. Joanne McCallum, who was the founder and chairperson of that company, is one of my mentors. She and I worked on Canada Green Building Council together. She just recently completed her term as a board member, but working in collaboration and really looking at and we held an energy budget equally as important as the cost budget. So from the very beginning, we worked to 2 budgets. So any decision that was made, it's a little bit like others have talked about in terms of the cost of rent and then, you know, occupant cost. And it was really looking at what is the longer time cost, you know, initial project cost, and then looking at an energy cost, which I think now we're much more looking at a more holistic, but those are the 2 budget drivers that were comprehensive enough for the client group to work with. So this project, you can keep going, Katrina. Geothermal, it's a combination of geothermal, and you can see the solar panels that really sort of show as these flying wings, but kind of showing the muscles of the building. We really wanted to express it. This building will be monitored, and occupant behavior is key. So every student who comes in to plug in their stuff, and our global love of coffee, now that there's all of a sudden a cafe inside, are all things that we kind of have to look at in terms of increased energy. So it's constantly a calibration, but right now it's performing better than we thought it was going to be in occupancy. So this is showing that energy model progress and how it kind of goes up and down, and how we look at the various components of that. Once again, plug loads are always, you know, something that we've always got to kind of be really mindful of, because they rise with occupants and fall with occupants as well. Please progress. And so now what I'm finding is, now that we've got really low energy buildings, what of course, as things happen and always make it interesting, is now embodied carbon has started to go as a longer term return on investment. So I would say in our LEED Platinum buildings that we've built, and even in the Passive House that we, and even some sort of, you know, living building challenge pieces, what we're now beginning to find is, it used to be in a typical LEED Platinum building, it would be a 5-year return on investment for embodied carbon. Now that we have net zero or net positive carbon buildings, we're now looking at embodied carbon being a 12-year payback. So all of a sudden we've kind of knocked that out of whack. So right now, I think the next thing we'll start to look at is the financial budget, the energy budget, and the embodied carbon budget. We do know that emissions, we do know that air and groundwater respect no border, and we're only as good anywhere in the world as the, you know, 40 billion metric tons of concrete they're going to get poured into Africa between now and 2050, and that number goes to 50 billion if you look at 2060. So we're very focused on now in terms of you know, climate deterioration, I would say, not climate change, but this is all about recognizing that we all need, as a world, especially Western world, or you know, areas where we are you know, first world nations, to really focus on third world economies and really try to bring them up to our levels, because we can't kind of block off what's happening in parts of the world. Is there one more slide? Katrina's, there we go. That's it. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Lisa. And it's great to see that link between healthy and net zero buildings, which is, of course, one of the long-term aims of the entire World Green Building Council. So great to loop that all back together. Okay, so we have heard from each of our panelists now. Thank you so much to the 5 of you for giving our audience an insight into each of your areas of expertise. That was so interesting, and thank you for your time and preparation. We've hit an hour already, but I'm going to take the liberty as moderator of getting in a couple of the questions that have been asked. We've got a couple of really interesting things, so we'll probably run over by 5-10 minutes or so, but if anybody needs to drop out, no problem at all, and the recording will be available soon. So let's kick off with a question that was submitted in advance. And it's really relevant to the presentations we've had, because we've definitely had a theme about data and intelligent technology and active buildings and sensors. So opening this up to all of you, what role do you think, if there is one, that technology and smart active buildings have in helping us to achieve this goal of green and healthy buildings?
Katrina, can I weigh in since I unmuted myself? I think it is critical. I think Raefer talked a lot around, we don't need more databases, but we need the connection, but we need the full disclosure and looking at the validity of that data. We have a phrase that we use at B+H, which is data, not diva. And I think that kind of frames the conversation around, you are then talking about quantifiable, you're talking about research, you're talking about known things. It doesn't become personalized. So I think it actually makes decision making and a lot of this measuring and calibrating and budgets that I've been talking about work, and with a being agnostic around some of the choices. So I do think that it helps tremendously.
Thanks, Lisa. Does anybody else want to jump in on that?
Happy to add to that, Katrina. It's Despina. I completely agree with what Lisa said, and I think for me the piece I would add is that unless we have the data, we can't move forward with really robust evidence-based design and business cases, and that's where the technology interface becomes so empowering. A lot of the things that we've all referenced today, we've all known intuitively for many years. It's just now the evidence is so compelling that it's very difficult for organizations, individuals, policymakers to ignore it. So that's why I think it's critical.
I completely agree. Any last thoughts on that one? No, let's move on. Thank you. So interesting change of tack here, but I've had a really interesting question submitted from Green Pact Africa. And they're asking, what are the planned remedies for non-green buildings that have already been constructed worldwide?
Hi, it's Lisa again. I can definitely speak to this because retrofits are a huge component of what we do. The TD Centre in Toronto, Canada, that's a Mies van der Rohe 1960s and 70s 5-building high-rise complex, was restored to LEED Platinum EBOM and the first WELL-certified Platinum campus of tall towers in the world, and with so much built. And if you look at New York, what's happening in New York right now, and the retrofit of tall towers is huge. But of course, our Achilles heel are all of the mid-range buildings owned by smaller developers. I think with Despina, with Cushman, Wakefield, and with others looking at portfolios of buildings, the large developers are easy. It's the developers that own one building, or not even developers, but the owner-occupied buildings that we really have to focus on. I think that's something globally that I hope World Green Building Council can start to really be a platform to share that information, because we're only as strong as our weakest link. And I know for New York, that is their focus right now through Urban Green, is how do we engage and how do we improve that retrofit market to get to, low energy and less VOCs, all of the things that we're talking about. But I do think that we've got to kind of come up with programs that are starting to focus a little bit more about that massive amount of majority buildings that are in that zone around the world.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And I completely agree. We have a responsibility as the World Green Building Council to be showcasing best practice and trying to inspire replication of it around the world, and something for us to think about with our case studies for next year. It's a nice idea, thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I'll add as well. I mean, the general, there's living in China for the past 17 years. There's that question is really predominant as well. I mean, the larger building stock is anything but green, and it's going to be lingering for a long time. These are billions of square meters, and so that question comes up again and again and again. And I think the first piece is really awareness, just as much information as can be put out there on those buildings. When we're working on air quality as one example, very often the knee-jerk reaction is, well, if I don't know, that's kind of better. If I know, I need to fix things. And the trend that is obviously omnipresent throughout the world is this merger between building data and social data, and so having things like energy and water quality and air quality becoming a lot more public, and that's a good thing. The more public they become, the more it raises questions about the buildings that are not public, and people start to wonder on, well, hang on, do I move into that apartment? Do I move into that office? What is the quality of living within that space? And I think one of the big first steps is making as much data as public as possible, from energy consumption to air quality, to water quality, so on and so forth. Sometimes it's government driven, as we've seen in Australia with energy. Other times it's completely voluntarily driven, as we've seen with air quality in China. But more awareness through public data is the first and most powerful step that we've seen across the board to get that mid-tier and lower tier of buildings engaged.
Thanks, Raefer. And that really brings home again this theme of data and our need to use technology to collect data wherever we are in the world, which is, I think, a really interesting take-home message for us all to reflect on. Now, I've got one last question I really want to ask you all, but let's keep our answers really quick before we wrap up. But for our built environment practitioners on the line or listening to the recording of this, how would you guys, our expert panelists, suggest that we address some of the clashes that occur when we have a green and a health agenda? So for an example, we've talked a lot about air pollution in Asia. What do you do when you need air filtration to ensure good air quality, but you know that's going to use more energy? How do we do both?
I could have a start at that. This is Helen. I think one of the points that I would say, coming from my background in urban planning, there's always competing interests when you're looking at designing of a place, whether it be a building or a new community, and there is a requirement for balance. But we also need to shift the way that we think about designing and operating buildings in terms of the cost and the benefit of certain measures. So I think this is really a question of not saying there's a limited pot of money and we can only work within that, but rethinking the value over the longer term. And sometimes that requires, looking at different finance options, whether insurance can be reduced because you have a more sustainable, resilient building, whether medical insurance costs could be reduced because you have a healthier building, that type of thing. So I think it's rethinking the value rather than considering where we are right now with the current structures in place for financing and management of buildings and employees, et cetera.
Hi, it's Lisa. I have a one-word answer, which is renewables. If we use renewable energy sources and we focus on the health and well-being, and I think that is, that hits both targets.
Hi, this is Jason. For us, for Mannerhammer, we look at it as putting the data in the hands of those that matter. And for many of us in the real estate industry, we do know that in many cases, there's a misalignment of the motivations between the various parts of the value chain, from the property owner, manager, operations, all the way down to the end user. And many a times, the one who requires a clean air is often the one who is not allowed to have the clean air. So as data becomes more and more democratized, and data gets in the hand of those who are willing to pay for it, then I think the entire value chain will shift to serve that need. And that's where we start to have better alignment between healthy and green.
Thanks, Jason. A last word from Raefer?
Yes, hard to improve, but I completely. So I'll add to Helen as well. I think we too often look at this as an optimization exercise. How much more can I squeeze out of the energy? How much more can I squeeze out of the air? Without opening up the conversation to, all right, if I'm improving here, what derivative effect does it have on other things, leases, occupancy, so on? And Despina covered a lot of that as well. And in order to get to that level, it's entirely about experience. So the getting there is 100% doable. It's been shown in multiple fields again and again. It's really just a question of experience, doing as many projects as quickly as possible to gain that experience and figure out how to create that balance. But I think well within reach, and repeating myself requires people rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty.
Thanks, Raefer. Let's wrap this up here, but thank you so much to all of our great speakers from today's session. Despina, Raefer, Helen, Jason, Lisa, you guys have been wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you also to those of you who've attended today. And I hope you found it a valuable and enjoyable session. I'm sorry we've not got to all the questions, but there have literally been dozens of them. So please do get in touch with me afterwards if you would like me to facilitate a connection for you, or if you would like to access the slides. So we've had a great 3 weeks of webinar sessions for World Green Building Week, and it's been great fun to conclude them today with this fantastic session. So thank you all for our support of our global campaign. As I mentioned, this session, as well as the recordings of the previous sessions, will be available online via YouTube soon. So keep an eye on the World Green Building Council social media channels for links to that. Now, thank you all very much for joining us, and I hope you have a really great day.